Lewis, we heard on the radio you saying, I'm nowhere, I don't know what's happened. We understand there was damage. It was about 20 points of downforce, which Martin said he worked out as about half a second a lap. Yeah. So does that help you today, knowing that that's how much you were carrying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because I think he was feeling pretty decent up until then. I got a good start. Held position. I was holding on to the group. I was managing the tyre as well, so I was feeling optimistic. And then I didn't see it happen, but obviously I heard I hit a ground bump, so that's devastating. So I love animals, and I'm so sad about it. Oh God, that's horrible. That's never happened to me here before. So, but the floor, basically, the right side's hole in it, and all the veins are all gone. So given that, and we had a brake issue halfway through as well, and then we stayed out probably too long in the first stop, and came out behind traffic, and just went from one thing to another. So I'm grateful that I could just finish, particularly with the brake issue I had, and bag those points. We're really in need of an upgrade, and there's lots of things that need to change in order for us to be competing in the front.
Is there an upgrade coming anytime soon?
They don't really talk about it much. I mean, chasing them. There is. I think we have something coming hopefully next week, but I don't know if it's much. Or I don't know how much it is. I don't think it's going to be a lot. So I think it's just one of those years.
But compared to 2 weeks.
How is it possible that the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton is fighting for a simple 6th place in a Ferrari that promised to return it to glory? What he said after the race in Canada is not only revealing, it is a scream of technical aid disguised as diplomacy. And the worst, Ferrari already knows what is wrong but fails to fix it. Because today we are going to crumble word for word what Hamilton really wanted to say, and what that reveals of the internal drama in Maranello. In the Canada 2025 Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton ended in 6th position. At first glance, it may seem just another average result for a team still in the process of adaptation. But when we analyze the context, the performance of the car, the technical conditions of the weekend, and above all, its subsequent statements, we discover a much more worrying background. What happened in Montreal was not a simple bad day. It was the crystallization of a deep problem between the pilot and the machine, between the expectation of a new golden era and the harsh reality of a Ferrari still trapped in its own technical labyrinth. The day began with some hope. Both in free training and classification, Hamilton showed indications of having found some rhythm, perhaps a configuration that would finally allow him to feel comfortable within the SF25. But that optimism was quickly diluted with the development of the race. From the first stint, the car demonstrated an instability that disarmed any attack strategy. Constant locks and braking, lack of grip when leaving slow curves, and a sensation of disconnection between the steering wheel and the chassis response. They were not simple details. They were serious symptoms of a car that has not been designed with the needs of the pilot in mind. After getting out of the car, Hamilton did not raise his voice or sought excuses, but every word of his was an alarm for the most attentive. He acknowledged that he had progressed about previous quotes, but he did it with clarity that cut the air. The fundamental basis of our car is not as good as that of the boys in front. It is a devastating phrase, because he doesn't talk about a bad setting. Talk about an air design philosophy, of a poor aerodynamic structure, of a car that, even in the hands of one of the best pilots in history, cannot compete. And it wasn't the only thing. Hamilton said the goal is still the podium, but he said it as if clinging to a more emotional than realistic ideal. His face, his tone, his body language, everything indicated something else: resignation. Do not despair, not yet. But an implicit acceptance that the Ferrari project is far from competitive. This type of contrast between public rhetoric and the internal message is very common in Formula One, but in this case it is especially striking. Because if Lewis, with all his experience, with his analytical and technical capacity, he feels that he is colliding with a wall, then that wall is real, and is more solid than Ferrari wants to admit. Even before the Canada GP, Maranello's engineers already knew that the SF25 had chronic aerodynamic load problems, especially in low-speed areas. But in Montreal, those deficiencies were accentuated. Hamilton found a car that did not want to turn, which required constant corrections, which forced him to pilot defensive. And for someone who has won races with cars that seemed an extension of their own body, this disconnection is as frustrating as unacceptable. So Hamilton finished 6th. But that result was not the problem. It was the symptom. The real problem is that, a career after career, the idea that Ferrari has delivered a car with good intentions, but with a deeply failed execution, is reinforced. And that is a narrative that can deteriorate not only the results but the internal morals of the team. Because when the star pilot begins to emit signs of doubt, it's just a matter of time before the entire structure begins to tremble. To understand why Hamilton's statements in Canada were not only an emotional relief but also a precise radiography of the technical disaster that Ferrari lives, it is essential to crumble the structural problems of the SF25. It is not a lack of passenger performance. What Ferrari faces in 2025 is a base design with insurmountable limitations in the short term. And that, in a sport where millimeter evolution separates the first from the 10th, is directly a competitive conviction. From the first sessions in Bahrain, passing through Australia, China and Canada, the employer has been clear. The SF25 suffers from an alarming lack of aerodynamic load, especially in slow and medium speed curves. This type of deficit not only compromises the passage through curve, it also forces the pilot to modify his driving style, stop before to leave slower and therefore lose tenths in each technical sector. It is a chain reaction that deteriorates the career rhythm, compromises the strategies, and forces Ferrari to compete with obsolete tools against increasingly refined rivals. Hamilton has been explicit in this diagnosis. During the Canadian weekend, he described how SF25 does not respond as he should. Literally, he said that the car does not want to turn, that he is forced to wait and wait for the chassis to react to his inputs. This statement is not a simple frustration comment. It is a direct clue that the car suffers from severe structural subverming, something that could be linked to a distribution of poorly balanced masses, a compromised suspension design, or an aerodynamic architecture that does not channel the air flow properly on the front axle. And there is more. Telemetry during training and the race in Montreal revealed critical load losses in areas such as the final chicane, where faster pilots such as Russell or Verstappen maintained stability to the limit. Instead, Hamilton reported constant blockages on the rear axle, a sign that the car balance is not only bad, it is unpredictable. That is the worst that can happen to an elite pilot, not knowing if the car is going to behave the same in the next lap. The problem is aggravated by Ferrari's inability to correct this trend. Between the FP1 and the FP2 in Canada, Hamilton and its engineers made settings in the setup that, according to him, should have done it faster. The result was the opposite. The car became even more difficult to drive. This indicates that the SF25 adjustment windows are extremely narrow. If you modify the suspension, the load is broken. If you change the height, the rebound is committed. If you alter the distribution of weights, the mechanical grip disappears. It is a car that does not tolerate experimentation and punishes every attempt to improve. In strictly public terms, Hamilton has been diplomatic. His speech remains measured, respectful, and long-term oriented. Talk about evolution, joint work, reconstruction. But if we look carefully, there are cracks that cannot be ignored. In his words and, above all, in his silences, one of the most revealing moments occurred after the classification in Montreal. Lewis made an analogy that hit the entire paddock. He said that driving the SF25 was like trying to have someone without rhythm to learn to dance. It was not a loose phrase. It was a deep criticism, concealed with British humor, but containing a very severe technical judgment. Because if there is something that Hamilton understands better than anyone is when a car has a soul, and when not. And the most worrying thing is not that he has made that statement, but that it has begun to repeat it in different versions. In interviews, in hall conversations, even in the way in which it analyzes its onboard sessions, an emotional distance with the car is perceived. It is as if he still did not recognize him as his. As if the car was still an awkward loan, more than a natural extension of its style. Repentance, however, is not measured only in results. It is measured in what a pilot sees when he looks to the future. And that is where the situation for Ferrari is complicated. Because Hamilton did not reach Maranello to add intermittent podiums. He arrived to fight for his 8th title. And if, after months of joint work, discover that the structure of the team does not have agility, nor the vision, nor the immediate technical resources to sustain that ambition, then the disenchantment will climb. Fast. Ferrari needs an answer. Fast, effective, structural. It is no longer about winning a 10th by return. It is about recovering the technical credibility that has been eroding since the preseason. For that, the team must attack several fronts simultaneously. In the technical, it is urgent to redesign key elements of the SF25. The aerodynamic package, the suspension configuration, the general equilibrium of the car. They need to introduce a radical, non-evolutionary update package that attacks the base problems, even if that means modifying the conceptual direction of the car. But that is not enough. Ferrari must also review his operational methodology. because the problem is not only that the car does not yield. It is that when Hamilton asks for specific changes, the results are unpredictable. That speaks of a disconnection between the simulator, the CFD data, the wind tunnel, and the real track. And that, in 2025, is unacceptable. A top team cannot afford that level of internal incoherence. If you want to retain Lewis's confidence in her technical environment, they must demonstrate that they are able to quickly transform knowledge into practical solutions. Therefore, for Ferrari, this moment is much more than a bad streak. It is an institutional fire test. If you cannot take advantage of the knowledge, experience, and leadership of Hamilton to redesign your technical path, then this whole project will have been a wasted opportunity, and the story will not be kind to them. What follows is not just an improvement in the car. What follows is a choice. Ferrari must decide if he wants to be a real contender, or if he will continue to be a team trapped between the past and broken promises. And for Hamilton, what follows is equally clear. Either in Maranello a second sports youth, or this stage will end up being one of the most frustrating of his career.